Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Darin Selnick, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we'd love to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then talk about these amazing things that you're doing to advocate for veterans.
Yeah, great. So, I was born in Los Angeles in the Valley. We moved to Thousand Oaks when I was a kid. Had a nice middle class life, and then
Yeah.
when I was about 11 years old, my parents divorced,
Oh,
and unfortunately, my mom became a single mom with 5 kids, and we ended up on welfare. So
I'm sorry.
I had to. Well, it builds character.
Sure
It
does.
builds character and learn to be independent and productive. And one thing we learned was we didn't want to be on welfare.
Yeah.
So I started working from the age of 14 in summer jobs and stuff like that. Eventually went to Cal State Northridge.
Mm-hmm.
And at Cal State Northridge, myself a health science degree, got
Awesome.
enrolled in ROTC. The biggest, most famous person I ever knew personally at that time was Paula Abdul, was my biology partner.
Oh, wow. How cool.
Yeah, she was a Laker cheerleader. That's one of the reasons why I remember her.
Yeah.
And so I learned to fly. The Air Force paid for me to fly out of Santa Monica Airport,
Cool.
and I went into the Air Force on active duty in '85.
Awesome. So how long were you active duty?
Active duty, active and reserve, 20 years
Awesome.
through 2005.
Awesome.
Got to do a lot of great things. Got to work with the new Space Command, and during
Yeah.
the Persian Gulf War, we tested all the stuff that people take for granted now, like
Mhm.
GPS, which was secret stuff back in 1990. Now
Right.
everyone has it on their phone and everything else. The satellites, and so was in Space Command. Got to do a lot of great things. Meet, and be the escort for Dr. Teller, the founder of the H bomb.
Wow.
Dr. Sagan, the guy on PBS, the
Mhm.
astrophysicist, and all
Yeah.
that good stuff like that. Got to learn some really great things. So really enjoyed my Air Force career. Lived in different parts of the country, went to different parts of the world, um, and then got off of active duty and was in the reserves, and then had an opportunity to go to DC and work
Mhm.
for the secretary in 2001. And so I was in DC when 9/11 happened, and across from the White House. And I was on the ninth floor in the public affairs area in a meeting, and we had the big TVs on,
Yeah.
and the TV was behind me, and the first plane crashed, and we saw that. And we all stopped what we were doing. We thought, man, it's weird accident, like that happened during World War II.
Right.
And then the second plane hit, and then we knew it wasn't an accident. And
Yeah.
then the rumors started happening, and there's a plane coming for the Capitol, there's a plane coming for the White House, and then of course the plane ended up crashing into the Pentagon.
Right.
Absolute chaos.
Yeah.
And so I was, and the reason I went to the VA was because as a veteran, I was also involved in the Jewish War veterans. I
Mhm.
eventually joined the American Legion and AMVETS. So I was very active to help, veterans who were not as fortunate, who were suffering from the war.
Sure.
With Vietnam War was the biggest category back then when the World War
Mhm.
II generation was still around, who unfortunately have mostly died off at this point.
Yeah.
So I went to DC and to the VA to work on the inside as a veteran advocate. And that's what really started my veteran advocacy. Um, And of course, that just changed the whole face of government,
Yeah.
9/11. So we went from domestic policy to a war,
Hmm.
uh, the war on terror, which
Yeah.
which lasted way longer than we ever thought in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and those sorts of things. And so the VA had to change too, in terms of knowing what was going to be the injuries. And what we discovered was that with the new protective gear and the ceramic shields and all that stuff like that, we had a lot less military dying, but we had a lot more wounded.
Yeah.
We also had an all volunteer force. So in like Vietnam, you might do a tour or two, you might be drafted, but then you'd be out. In the all volunteer force, we didn't plus up
Hmm.
the military. What we used is people who didn't normally go into combat, National Guard, reservists. And so rather than a tour or two, we had men and women doing 3, 4, 5 tours. And you may do 1 or 2 tour and not have much PTSD, but you do 3, 4, 5 tours and you see enough war.
Yeah.
It really messes with people's head.
Yeah.
It
No,
really
it's true.
messes with people's head. And that's why we have a higher suicide rate and higher homelessness rate, substance abuse, and those things. So worked on a lot of stuff in the VA between 2001 and 2009. Headed up the faith-based and community initiative, created a VA Learning University, so we had a corporate university for all the, and as special assistant to 3 secretaries, got involved in every aspect of the VA. So it was um, very challenging, but a very connected with my values. Turned down some other more lucrative positions in other parts of the government so I could stay and help my fellow veteran.
Yeah.
And with the faith-based initiative, we had the opportunity to go ahead and have there's certain things government can and cannot do,
Right.
and it's an institution. And so there are things that veterans needs, but the government can't take care of, and
Right.
that's where the whole community could come in.
Right.
So, for an example, was you have homeless veterans who need eyeglasses, but it's not service connected, so the VA couldn't give them. So we set up a program where an eye maker for every $40 donated, we could get a new pair of eyeglasses. So people would donate money, and we would get them new eyeglasses.
Wow. That's cool.
And then there was veterans who were coming back from the war who having PTSD and stuff like that, and they were talking to their clergy, and their clergy didn't know how to help them. But the VA has its clergy,
Hmm.
and so we set up a program to teach clergy how to help veterans, how to refer them to the VA clergy, and how to refer them to the proper mental health and stuff like that. So
That's awesome, man.
it was a great program where we identified the needs, and we set up a new thing, supportive services for veterans and families
Hmm.
to prevent homelessness. So we did a lot of great work. We did a lot of lowering homelessness, and we did a lot to continue to help the veterans. I got left the VA in 2009, but in 2015 was appointed by Speaker Boehner to be on the Commission on Care, which was a commission to figure out how to improve and fix and modernize the VA healthcare system.
Okay.
I also have some background in healthcare from college and some private sector work that I did on that as well.
Gotcha.
Uh, so we had 2015 and 2016, we did the Commission on Care, had some good recommendations. Some eventually got accepted, some did not. But it gave me a much more in-depth look. I had worked with VHA, but now I did a 1 year in-depth on the situation.
Right.
And not wanting to go back to having bosses again, I became an independent consultant after I left the VA and was doing it independent consulting and working with nonprofits, 501c4s, organizations like Concerned Veterans of America, and continuing with the Jewish war veterans. I as the department commander for the state of California, the National Executive Committee. So continued to do that advocacy work. Um, got involved in the California Veterans Homes
Hmm.
and started a foundation to help the veterans inside the veterans homes. The veterans homes are great, West LA. Once again, it's an institution. There's a lot of quality of life needs.
Yeah.
You need to be able to do more than just hang around the institution, go to games. So we developed a foundation of 100% support. All the money that came supported the veterans in the home in the things that they needed, whether it be events. We even partnered with SAG-AFTRA in LA to go ahead and do play reads at the home.
Oh, cool.
So there's over
What a
300
great idea.
veterans home. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like we said, the best kept secret was the veterans home. Nobody really knew it was there because it was on the VA property.
Yeah.
So we did that. I also got involved with New Directions for Veterans,
Okay.
which is a big homeless provider,
Mhm.
because of my experience with the homelessness and help them work better with the VA. They asked me to join the board. So I've been on the board for a number of years with New Directions for Veterans in West LA, which has residential programs and non-residential programs on the campus and other places. And what people don't know is that you can get grant and per diem money for the programs, but that will only pay about 60%. So if you're
Hmm.
going to help homeless veterans, you have to fill the gap between what the government will pay to help and what the actual costs, because it's not just a bed.
Right.
It's getting them off of drugs, getting them sober,
Mhm.
getting them life skills, financial skills, getting them ready, and finding them a place so that they won't become homeless again.
Yeah, so you're kind of putting them back together, right? Piece by piece.
Exactly.
And it's,
Exactly.
it's mental health, it's, get your feet back on the ground. It's, you know what I mean? Like,
Becoming employable again,
yeah,
those life skills. So it's not just cleaning them up and giving them bed. That doesn't do
yeah,
anything. It's getting them up so they can have permanently be back on their feet, have permanent housing, have a permanent job, and overcoming what is it that caused them to be homeless.
yeah,
And to tell you the truth, it's very few veterans become homeless because they just don't have any money. Although some become temporarily homeless, because I can tell you about the young Marines and stuff like that where I live in the Oceanside area, who will get a wad of cash on active duty and then blow it on a Camaro or something, get off active duty. They've blown all their money and now they have no money for a place to stay.
yeah. Happens.
And unfortunately, they're told, hey, look, you serve in the military, everyone's going to offer you a job.
Mhm.
Then they don't. And
Yeah,
they say, oh, you drove a tank. Well, we don't have any tank positions in the corporate world, so
right.
we're not going to offer you a job. So it's a hard transition for a lot of veterans, and that really hasn't improved a lot. And I saw that in the VA, and I experienced it myself when I came off active duty. They said, Darin, you got great experience, and look, I did a lot of civilian equivalent stuff in the end, personnel,
Mhm.
education, training, HR, in my career. And they said that, but you did that in the military. It doesn't count.
Mhm.
It absolutely doesn't count. So we can't hire you because you have no civilian experience.
Yeah,
And that goes for about every occupation in the military. It doesn't
yeah,
matter. So it's a tough transition. That's why folks are trying to do equivalency training. I mean, you could drive a truck in the military, and then they'd say no, you have to go through truck driving school
mhm.
in the civilian world. So it's a hard transition for these, and this part of the underbelly. And PTSD will cause substance use, and substance use will lead to homelessness.
Yeah,
And then if you have PTSD, because you did 5 tours, you're not functioning well, that will also lead to substance abuse. And the PTS will lead to not being able to be employed, which will lead to homelessness and stuff like that. So there's certain things. It's not like every veteran has this problem, and people have to remember that it's 20% of the force actually do the real fighting, and
yeah,
80% like me do the support.
yeah. Well, it's a spiral, right? It's one thing that comes loose and then it's another thing that comes loose, right? So, one of the things that I would love to help with, and if I can help you, I'm all in. One of the things that I would love to help with is I owned one of the largest real estate offices in North America for 18 years here in North County. And I worked with a lot of people that were veterans, a lot of guys that and gals that, used to be active duty, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and they decided to get into real estate. And I saw a distinct, and one of them in particular had a son who had massive PTSD. And I worked with him and kind of did what I could to support. I don't know that I coached him necessarily. I mean, I guess I coached him, but I worked with him to kind of draw his son out a little bit, and connect with his son on a deeper level about
Mhm.
what it was that was messing with him and troubling him and that kind of thing. And he was able to help him. And I was able to help some, not all of them, but some of the veterans that came out of active duty and ended up working with us. And so that transition thing is a big deal to me.
Yep.
So if there's ever anything I can do, like I volunteered for USO on Camp Pendleton, and one of the very first things that I told them was I said, "Hey, I'd love to be involved in transition. I'd love to be one of the people that teaches these guys, this is what you need to prepare for. When you go out into the private sector, these are the things you need to be ready for, right? Because I'm the one that would sit and interview them. You know
Yep.
what I mean? And we'd have a conversation about, this is what you did in the military that has civilian applications. It's just they weren't prepared for that. And so I was doing a lot of the interviewing for them, I guess is the best way to put it,
Mhm.
because I was literally sitting with them going through, okay, talk to me about your job description in terms of what you did driving a tank, right? What did you do in that operation to where you had leadership responsibilities? How many people did you have that were in your command? That kind of thing. You with me? And
Yep.
so we would pull out of them, because they never thought about it. We would pull out of them the specifics of what they did for the military, and then how that applies to what they would do in the civilian life. So anyway, I don't know if that helps, but if I can help in any way teach that, it's something
Mhm.
I'm incredibly passionate about, and I know you can't tell because I hide it well, but it's a big deal to me. So anyway, if I can help you, I'm all in. So
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm a member of the chamber, the Oceanside Chamber of
yeah,
Commerce, and the chamber has a really good military veterans committee
there
that
you go.
meets once a month. So
Okay.
definitely opportunities through that avenue. Whether you're a chamber member or not, you can still come to the meeting and
Sure. Yeah, let me know when
certainly.
it is and I'm there.
Yeah,
So
okay, great,
so
great.
so let's talk about, where are we? So let me go back for just a second. I just need to back up for a second.
Mhm.
Growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Thousand Oaks?
My mom let us have like total freedom.
Yeah.
She's kind of a laissez-faire mom. And back in those days, before all the uh, problems we have in society today
Yeah.
with you could leave the house in the morning and come back when it got dark.
Yeah.
And so we would wander around the gully and to Wildwood Park and kind of do like Tom Sawyer
Yeah.
and cross over, which my wife now considers a dangerous childhood, and going over pipes over streams and just disappearing for the day or going to the movies and getting candy
Yeah.
and and we didn't have to be chaperoned.
Yeah.
We're on a schedule. We didn't have any hover moms, and so that was the great thing about growing up. We had our own neighborhood of kids about our own age.
Yeah.
We started our own movie theater in our garage with old
Wow.
projectors and stuff like that,
Awesome.
and so it was just just kind of like our gang of
Yeah.
1960s and 70s, and so it was really cool. I mean, we had just had the freedom to do whatever. If I wanted to high jump, because I was in high school, I would get
Mhm.
some mattresses and make my own high jump thing in the backyard. I mean,
Awesome.
it was just a total freedom to do, and no one worried about us getting kidnapped or
Yeah.
assaulted or those sorts of things. Unfortunately, with my kids, it was not as much freedom,
Yeah.
and we just grab on the bikes or walk and just grab a lunch and just take off and do what you needed to do. And that was the great thing about growing up. And so when we became poor, it was like, well, we still had enough to eat.
Yeah.
Didn't like the school food, so we'd bring our own food.
Mhm.
The school lunches were
Yeah,
terrible.
school lunches.
So we would we would do that, and look, I would collect aluminum cans and that kind of stuff like that, and get extra change, even besides when I started working. And so you just got to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
My favorite trick, so that people would know that I was poor, is I always had $20 in my wallet.
There
It
you
was
go.
always the same $20.
Yeah. It got a little
So
worn out, but right?
that's right. In junior high, I started selling Tootsie Pops.
There you go.
And then I got busted for selling Tootsie Pops. So
Yeah.
they said you can't do that. But if people wanted Tootsie Pops, I make some money selling Tootsie Pops. Mark
Right.
out free enterprise, so
You
to
know
speak.
why, right? Because if you sell the Tootsie Pops, you ruin their appetite for the school lunch.
Yes, that's it. So just harmless stuff like that.
Yeah.
But being poor didn't mean much. It meant I didn't have as nicer clothes and had to work harder and shoot. When I was in high school, I was in the evening janitor at my high school for a couple of years.
Yeah.
learn different skills. These things all helped because
Yeah.
when you go in the real world, you got to show up on time.
Yeah.
You got to have a hard work ethic. And that's what I said to my kids. I said, I don't care if you have a learning handicap or whatever it is, no one cares in the real world. They care that you show up, they care that you're good. So the
That
number
you
one
can be
thing
trusted, right? That you're
you can be
consistent.
you can be
You can be
trusted.
trusted. They know you're going to be there.
That's right. You're a quality worker. You work. I
Yeah.
said, always work harder than everybody else, and you will succeed. The
Yeah.
number one thing that my mother always told me that I took away from me that has served me well. She said, "I don't care whatever you want to do in life is great. You
Yeah.
know, whatever makes you happy, do." Her one advice though was, "Whatever you want to do, just be the best at it.
Yeah.
Just be the best at it. If you're going to be an artist, just be the best artist. If you're going to be
Yeah.
an engineer, be the best engineer." And that's what I've always done wherever I've worked is always to be the best, to work harder,
Wow.
smarter, and those sorts of things. And that's
What
what
a
I took
great
away.
mom. So I
Yeah.
think I know the answer to this, but who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Well, my mom later,
Yeah.
and probably the formative years before the divorce, was my father,
Yeah.
who worked two jobs, didn't have a college degree, had a high school education, came from Detroit, but to keep his family, fed and everything and try to get a middle class life, he worked two jobs. He worked for Lockheed, he worked a secondary job, he was a draftsman and stuff like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
So, we learned from him about hard work and doing
Mhm.
whatever it takes and not, not taking the easy way.
Yeah.
So very little self-reliance and, taught ourselves to swim, taught ourselves to ride bikes because, my mom had five of us
Yeah.
that she was trying to deal with, which was a hard thing. And my dad was working two jobs
Yeah.
to try to, feed five boys and in the house and the suburbs and all that kind of stuff like that. So it all served me well.
So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I really liked math.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it was probably one of my favorite subjects. I did really well. Uh, Too much of a favorite subject because I would devise my own ways to do math, and then they would accuse me of cheating. Um, and then so because I would like not pay attention or whatnot, so I wouldn't not figure out the official way. So I'd figure out my
Yeah.
own way.
Yeah.
And it was very good. And actually, my son was in junior high. They said come up with a new way to do square roots.
Yeah.
And so I came up with a way to come up new way to come up with square roots. And he took it to the teacher, and no one else could figure out a new way to do square roots. And he did a new way to square roots. He said, "Wow, that works." He said, "Sky, how did you do it?" My son said, "Well, my dad actually is the one who figured it out." But but not being in that but I started off as an engineering major, but it was
Yeah.
too limiting,
Yeah.
too limiting in terms of what. So I ended up in health science to get the
I got
general
I got
science. But to kind of finish up my story arc
Yeah.
here, I had been back into the VA during the Trump administration for a couple of years as a senior advisor to the secretary.
Okay.
And from what I learned in the Commission on Care, we created a thing called the Mission Act.
Mhm.
And being retired military, I get my healthcare out of Camp Pendleton with TRICARE Prime. And so I just borrowed what worked well from DoD with the Mission Act, things like access standards and community care, so you wouldn't have too long a wait. And so that was, and then the White House recruited me to come over to the White House when I was at the VA. And so then I eventually negotiated the Mission Act for the White House after we created it. And then the next secretary asked me to come back to the VA to implement it, which I did through 2019. And so that's been the greatest improvement in the VA healthcare system
Yeah.
for veterans is that through the access standards and the community care, you never have to wait too long or drive too far. You can always have access to either the VA or the community. And that's where I've done. And that's led to a lot of volunteer work because when veterans around the country are not getting the access they're supposed to be
Yeah.
and staff are not doing what they're supposed to be and following the law, I get a lot of people through the grapevine contact me and I help them indicate. And even in Oceanside, I had a female veteran who had PTSD,
Mhm.
who had community care, and the VA suddenly cut her off from her provider, and they said, "Hey, you have to come back to us because you've been in the community for 2 years." And the law says she doesn't have to. And she said to them, "Well, if I come back to the VA." how long of a wait before I can get a new provider? And they said 5 months. And she said, what am I supposed to do for 5 months?
Right.
I said, well, you can do group therapy. And she said, I don't want to do group therapy. This is really personal. You and
Right.
your mental health clinician is a really personal, private.
Right. Yeah.
You want to share that with a whole
Right.
bunch of other people, even if
Right.
they were veterans.
Well,
I said,
some people are introverts, right?
yes,
They
yes,
don't want to get into all that. They don't want to share
correct.
all that in front of a bunch of people.
Absolutely. So what I had to do is I went to the VA clinic in Oceanside, which is a very
Mhm.
big, nice clinic. And I
Mhm.
went to the mental health area and I met with a mental health provider in the clinic. And I said, hey, here is the deal. Here's what the Mission Act says. I used to be a VA employee. I wrote this thing. I
Mhm.
implemented it. This is what it says. And he said, I'm not aware of it. Can you explain it to me? So I explained it to him and everything like that. And yeah, good outcome was that because I went with her because they said no new policy because I went with her and had the knowledge and talked to the staff and explained the law to them, which she was entitled to. 2 days later, they gave her back her provider in the community.
Awesome.
She's
Hey, is there any way we can get you in there to teach the rest of them? Because you taught one of them.
well, theoretically, they're supposed to be doing that. That's in the law.
Yeah.
And so I'd be happy to. I do this all the time. I go around the country. I did it in Montana the other month. Believe
Oh,
it or not, I've done 3 trainings on how to use the VA healthcare system and community care over in Texas with the border agents.
yeah.
So there's 1,000 military veteran border agents.
Mhm.
And through a friend of mine who lives over there, they said, hey, they need help. Darren, will you come and do an hour class with us on how to use the VA healthcare system because they're having problems using it. And so I said, fine. So I did one, and then they asked me to come back 2 more times.
That's cool, man. That's
And
cool.
I may eventually do one of some of the San Diego ones
Yeah,
as well.
let's figure that out because we need to
Yeah,
get that done.
yeah.
That needs to
So
happen.
it's yeah, they don't teach veterans how to use the system, even though the law says they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so veterans, it's healthcare is very complicated for them.
Mhm.
And I have, and I was in the healthcare industry, and my consulting work now. After I left the VA in 2019, I've continued to do consulting work, volunteer work with the Veterans Home and the homelessness, and my consulting work is with healthcare organizations that work with veterans and Center Veterans for America, which is 501(c)(4). So I spend a lot of time in DC educating staff and proposing how to do fixes and how to improve the VA services to veterans and make sure the proper oversight is happening so veterans can get the care that they've earned and they deserve. And any other benefits, because 9 years in the VA, worked for 5 secretaries, senior advisor too.
Yeah.
Everything that goes on the VA, I've had exposure, have helped, have worked. So people say, how do you know so much about the VA? And I say it's because I'm old. Been around a long time. I've worked this stuff for decades. Um,
I love it. That's so cool. So you're not getting older, you're getting better, right?
well,
Right.
hopefully I'm getting smarter.
Right. We're
Hopefully.
not getting older, we're getting better. Yeah, right.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Like a fine wine, right?
That's it.
So so today you're consulting with healthcare companies. Is there any other sort of a company that you could consult with that you could help?
Well, I mean, a lot of companies like to consult with on the government. The government's a very dark hole,
Yeah.
and people see a big pot of gold in the rainbow. What they don't know, there's a lot of traps there,
Yeah.
and that rainbow is a very difficult rainbow, and there's a lot of unofficial rules. So it's not just applying and being the best vendor. There's payola involved sometimes in the government. There is unwritten rules and relationships and so I've had billion-dollar companies spend a lot of money in years getting nowhere.
Yeah.
So it's really it's who you know, and then developing those relations. And there's ways to do that and ways to get your foot in the door. But and sometimes it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
So you gotta know what you're doing, and it's gotta be a long-term strategy. So I'm pretty much maxed out now with the clients I have.
Gotcha.
I did help a local to the Chamber of Commerce. I did a local medical devices company in Oceanside who wanted to do the pot of gold, and it just took them through those steps to educate themselves on. There's a pot of gold, but it's man, it's there's pirates in the sea, and
Yeah. No
and
kidding.
a lot of challenges, and you got to develop relationships. You got to develop partnerships. It's just not a quick strategy.
Right. So if there's a company out there that needs the kind of help that you can deliver, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, it's all been word of mouth.
Okay.
It's all been word of mouth. They can go on LinkedIn. They can go to, send me an email at Darin.Selnick@gmail.com.
Okay.
But
So
I do not advertise.
let's spell it.
Um,
Let's spell it. It's DARIN dot SELNICK at gmail.com.
Correct.
And and if you Google you, the first thing that the first thing that comes up is LinkedIn, right? And it's DARIN and then SELNICK is what you Google, right? And that's
Right.
your LinkedIn pops up first. So
Yes.
that's how I connected with you was, well, actually my assistant connected with you, but we're connecting you and I through LinkedIn. Um, so yeah. So what does tomorrow look like? What are you working on for the future?
Well, with a healthcare company, I'm working with legislation to do a pilot that would help veterans who use the VA and Medicare to connect those two systems. Because right
Okay.
now, if you're a veteran, and you use the VA and Medicare don't talk. So you
Hmm.
got trying to go back and forth. So that has some quality and some access issues because your doctors in the Medicare don't know what the doctors in the VA doing and vice versa.
Gotcha.
So we
Okay.
want to improve the quality of care and lower the cost for veterans by connecting those two systems, improve cost and quality, and access for veterans. So that's what I'm working on the healthcare side. On the advocacy side, on the homeless stuff, we're trying to continue to work on improving the payments for the providers, and make sure that we go forward in terms of how the homelessness works so that more homeless veterans who are ready to can be taken care of, continuing to work on the advocacy side for the veterans in the veterans home and identifying what we call the wish list and their needs, but also legislation to make sure that veterans are treated well by the staff, properly get their claims in a more timely manner, and continue to provide them more choice in their health care and more timely choice so that the horror stories that we keep hearing don't
Yeah.
happen. And trying to get veterans where they have the same choices that we have in DOD and other places, so that at all times, if VA is the best thing for them, they can access and get it quicker. And if the community provider is the best thing, that they can access that. So whatever is best for the veteran, making VA more veteran centric, living up to Lincoln's, promise to care for those who born in the battle, for their widow and for orphan. And so it's a continuing fight to educate. VA has announced a big deficit next year because they have been spending their money wisely. And I was in their organization for 9 years, so I know how they can blow money quickly.
Mhm.
But making sure they're spending the money on the veteran and not on contractors or redecorating offices or other
Yeah.
things that they do. But it's all about the veteran. It's all about the veteran and making sure that they can access their benefit and not have to fight to access their benefit.
So
Whether they can have,
if a veteran is going through that kind of struggle like that one lady was in terms of working
Mhm.
with the VA, can they reach out to you? Is that okay?
Yeah, they can reach out to me. I also would encourage them to reach out to the organization that I am the senior advisor as a contractor, where that's Concerned Veterans for America.
Okay.
CV, the letter 4A.org. There's a Facebook page. And so through that organization, there's a network of grassroots volunteers and staff in
Okay.
a whole number of states. And I can also connect them to other folks as well. But they can reach out to me, but it's best to reach out to me through CV4A,
Okay.
because as a 501c4, it has supporters and donors and grassroots, and that is the effective organization that helps do oversight, helps have Congress do what it's supposed to do, and tries to keep the VA on the straight and narrow.
So it's C as in concerned, V as in
Mhm.
veterans, the number 4,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
America A.org. So CV4A.org. They need to
Correct.
go there, and through there they can reach you and anybody else that can help
Yes, they can
advocate
they
for them.
can post their stories. We collect their stories. We do advocacy. So this helps us put together what's going on around the country,
What the
what's the
needs
common
are, all that kind of
themes,
thing. Yeah.
and stuff like that, whether
Okay.
it's healthcare or claims or whatever. I mean, I could spend an hour just telling you the horror stories that come to me.
Yeah.
And of course, people don't come with me. They're great stories. They come with me. They're horror stories.
Yeah.
But we don't want any veteran to have a horror story. We want
Yeah.
them to
No,
have.
it's true.
We want them to have the options, and we do a lot of that patient advocacy for them.
Yeah, my father-in-law is a veteran, so it's near and dear to my heart. You know, he was a war hero in Vietnam, awarded the Silver Star and the Purple Star.
Oh, that's quite a.
And yeah, and I had no idea, right? And you wouldn't know it if you met him. You wouldn't know it. And he, you know, the first year that I'm married to his daughter, he has a retirement party, and there's hundreds of people that go to this retirement party because he had been with MCC, the Bureau of Prisons, for 23 years.
Mhm.
Hundreds of people there, and he's wearing a sport jacket, and there's a silver bar on his lapel, and he pointed to it. We're sitting at the table, and he goes, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's the Silver Star." And then he tells me what happened about the battle, you know, that took place that ended up earning him this star, this Silver Star. Afterwards, I'm driving home with his daughter, my wife, and she said, "What were you and Dad huddled at the end of the table talking about for so long tonight?" And I said, "Well, he was telling me the story of the battle that awarded him the Silver Star." And she started crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Do you know he's never spoken of Vietnam?
Yeah.
He must really love you to be willing to open up to you about that." Isn't that nuts? Anyway, it really is.
It's
It really
it's a
is.
common story.
Yeah, it's a big deal, man. It's, you know, if you can get them to open up and you can get them to talk, it's unbelievable what you'll learn. And it helps them in a cathartic way to sort of get it off their chest. You know, it's not like he was burdened by it, I don't think, but I think it helped him, you know, and we certainly grew closer in our relationship. So, Darin, I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been awesome. And thank you again for relocating and all that for us. And
Um,
thank you for everything that you're doing for our veterans, man. From the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you enough.
I appreciate it. I'm happy to be on your show and uh, continue to get out the word.
Super proud to have you here, bud. Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.